I found my wife secretly transferring $200, $0 into her sister's name to cover up her affair with our divorce lawyer, and now he's been missing for days. Turns out she's been planning to steal the house worth $1.2 million, and I just found the documentation yesterday. I never thought I'd be the guy writing this kind of story, but here I am. It all started with a gut feeling that something was off, but I didn't have any proof, just little things that didn't add up. My wife had always been a bit of a control freak. She liked things done her way, and she was good at hiding her true colors when it suited her. We'd been together for over 10 years, built a life that seemed pretty solid on the surface. Nice house, good jobs, 2 kids, everything you'd expect. But about 6 months ago, I started noticing her acting differently. She'd come home late more often, sometimes smelling like perfume I didn't recognize. She'd brush off my questions with a bitchy attitude, saying I was paranoid or insecure. I brushed it off, convinced I was just overthinking things. But then she started being overly defensive when I asked about her phone or her emails. I'd catch her deleting messages, hiding her phone when I entered the room. Small things, but they stacked up. One night I was working late at the office when I decided to check our joint account out of curiosity. I'd always been the one handling the finances, but lately she'd been pushing me aside, saying she'd take care of everything. That's when I saw it. A transfer of $200, $0, gone just like that, from our account into her sister's name. It was labeled for emergency, but I knew better. I knew that money wasn't for any emergency. It was to cover something up, something big. I immediately felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. I pulled up the account history, and that's when I saw the real reason she'd been so defensive lately. She was having an affair, with our divorce lawyer no less. His name was Mark, a slick, smooth-talking guy who had been handling our legal stuff for months. I'd never suspected anything, not until I saw the documentation. She was planning to transfer the house, our house, worth over $1 million, to her sister to cover her tracks. That's when I realized she wasn't just cheating on me, she was planning to steal everything we had. I was stunned. My mind raced with questions. How long has this been going on? How deep was her betrayal? And then I remembered the nights she'd been sneaking around, the secret calls she'd taken in the bathroom, the way she'd suddenly become so secretive about her finances. It all clicked into place. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. And now she was trying to pull off the biggest scam of her life. The next day I confronted her. I didn't hold back. I laid out what I knew, showed her the bank statements, the documentation, everything. Her reaction was classic, defensive, bitchy, full of lies. She said I was paranoid, that I was reading too much into things. She claimed the money was a loan from her sister, that she was planning to pay it back soon. When I pressed her about the transfer of the house, she said it was just a backup plan. Not real, just something she was thinking about. She insisted she loved me, that I was overreacting, and that I needed to trust her, but I didn't buy it, not anymore. The betrayal cut deep. I felt angry, betrayed, humiliated. She had lied to my face for months, and now I was staring at the reality that my wife, the woman I'd built my life with, was a con artist in her own right. The worst part, the lawyer Mark had gone missing for days. I'd tried calling him, texting him, but he disappeared. I had a sinking feeling he knew what was coming and decided to bail. That only made me more suspicious. Was he in on it? Was she planning to frame him? Or was she planning something even worse? I spent the night tossing and turning, trying to process everything. The house, the money, her lies, Mark's sudden disappearance. It's like I'd been hit by a freight train. I felt betrayed, furious, and utterly lost. How could I have missed all of this? How did I let her get away with it for so long? I kept asking myself if I should just walk away, divorce her, or try to fight back. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her steal everything without a fight. Not my house, not my money, not my life. I knew I had to act fast. The evidence was there, and I was starting to put the pieces together. I needed a plan, something to expose her, to stop her from taking what she wanted, and to make her pay for what she'd done. I wasn't the kind of guy to go to the police over financial betrayal, but I knew I had to do something. I just didn't know what yet. All I knew was that this was just the beginning of a long, complicated game, and I was about to play it to win. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep her lies ran. Always liked to keep control, but this was next level. She had planned everything out so carefully, covering her tracks, manipulating the situation to her advantage. I started digging through her emails, her phone, anything I could get my hands on. I needed to know if she had any backup plans, other people involved, or any other surprises waiting for me. One thing that kept nagging me was her reaction during the confrontation. She didn't even flinch when I laid out the evidence. Instead, she threw a tantrum, calling me paranoid, accusing me of spying on her, saying I didn't trust her after all these years. That's classic blame shifting, making herself the victim. She insisted she was innocent, that the money was a mistake, that she'd never cheat or steal from me. But I could see through her bullshit now. I found her emails from Mark, and it was worse than I expected. They'd been meeting secretly, exchanging flirty messages, even talking about how they'd be together after I found out. The worst part, they'd planned to keep me in the dark until everything was settled. She'd been lying to my face about her meetings with him, about everything. It was like a betrayal on every level, emotional, financial, legal. I also got access to her phone records. Turns out she'd been texting Mark constantly, late nights, early mornings, even during our family dinners. She'd be texting him while I was sitting across from her, acting like everything was normal. Then I found a series of encrypted messages, some labeled house plan, transfer, backup plan. She was orchestrating this entire scam behind my back, and I had the proof. Now, what made it even more sickening was how she kept lying, even when I confronted her with the facts. She'd spin stories about how she was doing it for the family, how she wanted to protect us from some imaginary threat. That was her favorite line, protecting us, but at what cost? I saw right through it. She was just trying to shield herself from getting caught, to keep her little empire intact. Meanwhile, her sister, Lisa, was complicit in this whole mess. I found out she'd been helping her sister funnel the money, probably getting a cut or some kind of payoff. Lisa always was the enabler, the one who'd do anything for a quick buck. I couldn't believe I'd trusted her too. I'd always thought she was a decent person, but now I saw she was just as rotten as. And then there was Mark, missing. I tried calling him repeatedly, but no answer. Texts went unanswered. I even hired a private investigator just to see if I could find out where he was or what was happening. The Pi told me Mark had gone dark, no trace of him. That was suspicious. It was like he knew the storm was coming and decided to bail before everything hit the fan. I was starting to piece everything together. Plan was more elaborate than I thought. She wasn't just cheating on me with Mark. She was planning to take everything, our house, our savings, everything we'd built, and run. She'd set up her sister as the fall guy, making it look like Lisa was the one behind the money transfer. That way, she could keep her hands clean and walk away with a clean slate. The thought of losing everything, our house, our future, the life I thought I knew, hit me hard. I felt sick at the idea of her walking away with my house, my savings, and maybe even the kids' trust. I'd worked so hard for this, and now it was all at risk because of her lies. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her get away with this. I started gathering every shred of evidence I could find, documenting her lies, her secret meetings, the financial transactions. I also reached out to a lawyer I knew, someone who specialized in financial crimes and betrayal. I wanted to know my options, what I could do to stop her. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how far she was willing to go. She lied, cheated, manipulated everyone around her. And now she was missing her lawyer, probably hiding, maybe even planning her next move. I felt a mix of anger and helplessness. How did I get here? How did I let her manipulate me for so long? One thing was clear, I couldn't trust her anymore. Not as my wife, not as the person I thought I knew. I was starting to see her for what she really was, an opportunist, a liar, a thief. And I was determined to stop her before she took everything I cared about. I didn't care about her sob stories or her excuses. I was done being played for a fool. If she thought she could walk away with my house and my life, she had another thing coming. I was going to fight for what was mine, no matter what it took. After I gathered all the evidence, I knew I couldn't just sit around and wait for her to make her move. Whatever her plans were, They were clearly moving fast, and I had to get ahead of her. I also realized I needed to be careful. She was manipulative, and I knew she'd do anything to spin the story in her favor. I decided to go to a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but someone who specialized in financial fraud and betrayal. I needed someone who could tell me what my legal options were, how to protect what's mine, and how to expose her without giving her the chance to twist everything. In the meantime, I started paying closer attention to her movements. She was acting even more bitchy, snapping at everyone, lying about where she was and trying to cover her tracks. She'd come home late, claiming she was working late at the office, but I knew better. I found receipts from a hotel downtown, and I even caught her texting someone late at night. I could see her trying to keep her story straight, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I was ready to confront her again, but I had to be strategic. One night, I decided to follow her. I waited until she left, then trailed her to a nondescript hotel. She was there for hours, probably meeting with Lisa or maybe even Mark. I felt a mix of anger and disgust. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face, betray me like this? It was like watching someone else's life unfold, and I was powerless to stop it. I also started digging into her bank accounts and her phone records more aggressively. That's when I found out she'd been secretly transferring money into her sister's account, just as I suspected. But then I saw something even more shocking. She'd been planning to forge documents to transfer the house into her sister's name. She'd been talking to some shady fake notary about fake signatures, fake IDs. She was ready to pull off a full-blown scam, and I was lucky I caught her in time. Meanwhile, Mark still hadn't shown up. I kept calling him, sending messages, but no luck. I even hired a spy to track him down. Turns out he'd left town suddenly without telling anyone where he was going. That made me suspicious. Maybe he knew what was planning and he decided to cut his losses. Or maybe she convinced him to disappear so he wouldn't get caught up in her mess. I started to realize that was more than just a cheating wife. She was a con artist in her own right. She'd been planning this for months, covering her tracks, manipulating her sister, talking to shady contacts, all to steal what we'd built. She was willing to lie, cheat, and betray everyone, including her own family, to get what she wanted. I knew I had to act fast. I contacted my lawyer and shared everything I found. We discussed the best way to stop her, filing for an emergency injunction to freeze her bank accounts, getting a court order to prevent her from transferring the house, and gathering all the evidence I could to expose her in court. I also decided to hire my own investigator to dig into her contacts, her phone, her emails, and her financials. At this point, I felt a mix of betrayal and determination. I was furious that she'd been playing me all along, that she'd been secretly planning to take everything. But I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to protect myself, my kids, and the house. And I had to do it before she made her move. I was starting to see her for what she truly was, a manipulative, ruthless woman who'd do anything for money. And I was ready to fight. I knew this was just the beginning, but I was no longer going to be the passive victim. I was going to take control, expose her lies, and make her face the consequences of her actions. I didn't care what she said or how she spun it. I had the evidence, and I was going to use it. By now, I was completely immersed in gathering evidence and planning my next move. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that scheme was more elaborate than I initially thought. She wasn't just planning to transfer the house into her sister Lisa's name. She was orchestrating a full-blown scam, one that could ruin everything I'd worked for. I knew I had to act fast before she executed her plan. I met with my lawyer, a sharp guy named David who had seen his fair share of fraud cases. I laid out everything I had: the bank transfers, her secret meetings, the fake notary plans, her attempts to forge documents. David was cautious but confident. He told me that legally we could file for a court injunction to freeze her assets and prevent any transfer of the house. But we'd need concrete proof, and that's where I had to be careful. Anything I presented had to be airtight. Meanwhile, I kept following movements. I found out she'd been meeting with some shady contacts outside our city, people who specialized in fake documents and illegal transfers. I managed to get a photo of her with one of these men, a guy named Tony, who looked like he knew exactly what he was doing. I felt sick seeing her in that situation. She was willing to risk everything, including her freedom, to pull this off. One night I decided to set a trap. I left my phone hidden in the house, recording her conversations and actions. Sure enough, she met with Tony again, discussing the final steps, how to fake the signatures, how to hide the transfer, how to make sure I never found out until it was too late. I sat in the dark, listening to her talk about how she was going to walk away with everything and leave me holding the bag. It was like hearing her admit her plans aloud, and it made my blood boil. Then, out of nowhere, she slipped up. During one of her phone calls, she mentioned Mark. She said, "Mark, been quiet lately, but I think he's finally understanding. Once I get the house transferred, I'll make sure he's taken care of, and then I can finally relax." That's when I realized she'd been planning to frame Mark all along, make it look like he'd been helping her all the way, then disappear to avoid any consequences. I felt a surge of rage. This woman wasn't just a cheater. She was a con artist capable of anything. I started to think about how to turn this around. I contacted my lawyer again, and we discussed the best way to move forward. We agreed to file for an emergency court order to freeze her assets, to seize any documents related to the house transfer, and to get a judge's order preventing her from leaving town or transferring property. The next day, I took action. I went to the courthouse with all my evidence and filed for an injunction. The process was quick. I had to act swiftly. Meanwhile, I hired a private investigator to track whereabouts and see if she was planning to run. Turns out she'd been trying to contact Lisa, telling her to prepare for the big move. I knew she was close to executing her plan. That evening, came home furious. She sensed something was off. She kept asking me questions, trying to get me to tell her what I knew. I played it cool, pretending I didn't have all the evidence. I told her I was just worried, that I was trying to protect us. She sneered, calling me paranoid, saying I was overreacting. But I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew I was onto her. I stayed calm, knowing I had the law on my side now. I told her I was going to get everything sorted, and if she was innocent, she'd have nothing to worry about. But I also knew that she was desperate and that her next move could be anything. I couldn't let my guard down. Every instinct told me she was planning something, maybe even trying to get rid of evidence or make a run for it. I thought about how betrayed I felt. All those years I thought she loved me, that we had a stable life. But it was all a lie. She'd been planning this scam for months, maybe longer. And now, as I sat there watching her throw a fit, I realized that trust was completely shattered. I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. I didn't know if I wanted to. But one thing was certain. I was prepared to fight. I was going to do everything in my power to stop her, to expose her lies, and to keep my house. I knew this wasn't over yet, but I was finally taking control of the situation. I had the evidence, the law on my side, and a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. Whatever came next, I was ready. The court hearing came sooner than I expected, but I was ready. I had all my evidence organized: bank statements, recordings, emails, even the photos of her with Tony. I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread walking into that courtroom. Was there too, looking furious, her bitchy attitude on full display. She tried to act like she was the victim, crying about how I was accusing her of crazy things, but I knew better. I wasn't just accusing her. I had proof she was planning to steal our house, and she wasn't going to get away with it. The judge listened carefully as my lawyer laid out the case. We presented the bank transfers, the fake document plans, the secret meetings, and the evidence of her attempting to forge signatures. The lawyer tried to argue that there was no concrete proof, that she was innocent, that she was just trying to protect the family. But the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence was overwhelming. She granted the temporary injunction to freeze her assets and prevent her from transferring the house. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I saw some hope. His face twisted in anger and frustration, but she knew she'd been caught. She kept insisting she was innocent, that I was crazy, that she loved me and was only trying to do what was best. But I wasn't buying her lies anymore. I knew she'd been lying from the start. Meanwhile, I had my investigator tracking her every move. Turns out, she was trying to contact Lisa again, telling her to prepare to transfer the house into her sister's name. The investigator also found out had been meeting with Tony almost daily, discussing how to fake signatures and cover her tracks. It was clear she was desperate to execute her plan before the court caught up with her. That night, I felt a strange sense of victory, but also deep anger. I'd almost lost everything: our house, our future, my trust in her. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. But I was determined not to let her get away with it. I'd fought hard, gathered proof, and now I had the law on my side. I knew I had to stay vigilant. She was dangerous, and I wasn't going to let her destroy what little stability I had left. Over the next few days, I worked closely with my lawyer to tighten the legal screws. We filed for a full freeze of her assets and secured an order to seize any documents related to the house transfer. I also made sure to have a court date scheduled to make the injunction permanent. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on her movements. She was still trying to reach Lisa, still meeting with Tony. It was like she was trying to finalize everything before she was stopped. One evening, I caught her sneaking around again, this time trying to get into her sister's house. I followed her, lurking in the shadows outside her sister's driveway. When she saw me, she froze, then tried to act innocent, saying she was just visiting Lisa. But I could see the panic in her eyes. She knew she was running out of time, and I was right behind her. That moment was a turning point. I realized she was willing to go to any lengths to pull this off, faking her way out, lying, manipulating, even risking her freedom. But I wasn't going to let her. I had the evidence, the law, and the truth on my side. I was ready to fight her all the way to the end. As I stood there watching her try to cover her tracks, I felt a strange mix of sadness and resolve. I was mourning the woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved. But I also knew I couldn't trust her anymore. Not after everything I'd seen and heard. The betrayal ran too deep. Now it was just a matter of time. I knew she'd try to make a run for it, destroy evidence, or come up with some new lie. But I was prepared. My goal now was to keep my house, protect my kids, and make sure she paid for what she'd done. I wasn't just fighting for the house. I was fighting to reclaim my life from her lies. And I was determined to see it through, no matter what. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. Every hour brought new revelations, new threats, and a mounting sense that was spiraling further into desperation. She was trying to outsmart the system, to find loopholes, to get around the court orders, but I was one step ahead. My lawyer worked tirelessly, filing motions, gathering more evidence, and making sure every legal avenue was sealed tight. I wasn't going to let her steal my house or ruin my life without a fight. One morning, I got a call from the court. The judge had granted the permanent injunction. All her accounts were frozen, and any attempt to transfer or sell the house was blocked. That was the final nail in her plans. She was furious, screaming at me over the phone, calling me every name in the book, but I didn't care. I knew I had won a crucial victory, and I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with disgust. Meanwhile's behavior grew more erratic. She started losing her composure, lashing out at everyone around her. She tried to get her sister Lisa to lie for her, to say she had no idea about the transfers or the fake signatures. But Lisa, under pressure, finally cracked and told the truth, that had been planning this entire scam for months. That was the final blow. Her own sister turned against her. I also learned that Mark, the lawyer she'd been cheating with, had finally been located. Turns out he'd left town to avoid the fallout, but my pie tracked him down. He was hiding out, clearly terrified of what might do next. I didn't reach out to him. I didn't want to give her any more leverage, but I knew that at least he was safe for now. In the end, his empire of lies collapsed completely. The court ordered her to pay back the stolen money, and she was facing charges for attempted fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The house was safe, and I was finally able to breathe again. The betrayal had cut deep, but I had fought back with everything I had. Looking back, I realize how much this ordeal changed me. I learned that trust is fragile, and that the people closest to you can sometimes be the biggest enemies. I also learned the importance of staying vigilant, financially, emotionally, and legally. If I hadn't checked those accounts, if I hadn't followed the clues, I might have lost everything. Now I'm rebuilding. The house is still ours, the kids are safe, and I'm trying to put this nightmare behind me. But I'll never forget the lessons I learned. That sometimes the biggest betrayals come from the people you love most, and that fighting for what's right is the only way to come out on top. My advice to anyone in a similar situation: trust your instincts. Get your finances in order. Don't be afraid to dig deep and ask questions. And if you find something suspicious, act fast, because once the trust is broken, it's almost impossible to fix. But with determination and the right support, you can come out stronger on the other side.